Okay, I think I have them all. I spent the last couple of minutes going through all of my physical copies to see which of the Nobel Prize winners in the last century have I read. I don't have a physical copy of all of them, but I have a physical copy of a lot of them. I think this is more than half. And some of the authors I've read 3, 4, 5 books from, while some others I read earlier on in my reading life, back when I was still a college student and I didn't have money to buy every single physical copy of books. So we're gonna make do with these. And I swear I am missing some of them here, but I can't seem to find them anywhere in my bookshelf, which is starting to overflow. They might be in Manila. I realize I still have a few books left in Manila, such as Gabriel Garcia's Love in the Time of Cholera. I have a physical copy of that. I think it's in Manila. And then the Book of Jacobs. I haven't read it, but I do have the chonky big book when it was first released, also in Manila. I was so convinced I was going to read that. Oh well. Anyway, this is going to be fun. Ta-da! This is apparently a stack of books of some of the best authors in history. And by history, I mean in the past century. Nobel Prize winners. But let me put it down because it's a bit heavy. The funny thing is, half of that stack would be a mix of 2 authors, which would definitely be some of my favorite authors as well. And as I mentioned, some of the Nobel Prize winners I read maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so I had to pull out and open the vault, aka my Instagram story reviews back in 2020, 2021, 2019, when I didn't even have a bookstagram before, but I would still harass my friends with book reviews on my personal account, which is very helpful for me now to remember how I felt about those books back then. And it was actually quite refreshing to just see how younger SJ, and by younger I mean a college student, thought about some of these authors and some of these books. So let's get to it. There are 2 literary awards that I personally like to follow. More than that, I just read what I like. But number 1 would be the International Booker Prize. It is one of my favorite awards because I do love translated fiction and I try to go out of my way to read books outside of the Anglosphere and just the Western world. And it's a great place for me to discover new authors and discover new books. I think 15 books is usually the long list. And even if I don't like a book, I discover an author or people would recommend books to me because of that book or author, even if I don't like it. And it just opens up the world for me. There are tons and tons of books being released every single day, and I can't read every single one of them. So I think the International Booker kind of helps me shortlist it. And I've always had great experiences reading the International Booker Prize long list and short list, so I do love that. The other one though is the Nobel Prize in Literature, which, I don't know, it just has a certain aura to it that it is a culmination of an author's life's work, and it's decided upon not just their singular novels, which the other prizes are for, but just everything that they've worked on, everything that they've published in their whole lives. I think there's weight to that I really appreciate. And they don't always, I don't want to say don't always get it right because they have to choose one. I'm pretty sure so many better authors could have gotten this award, but I have had a pretty good experience with the Nobel Prize, which you will see today, but also some not so good ones. And 2016 was a questionable year because tell me why you awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature to a songwriter instead of someone in the actual publishing industry, but hey, that's not my battle to fight. Today we will be rating every single Nobel Prize winner that I have personally read, whether it be just one book or whether it be 5+ books, which there are some authors here that I really, really love and adore. And I'll be mentioning when they got their award. I'll be doing it chronologically from the oldest to the latest, which includes this year's winner of the Nobel Prize, as well as what books have I read from them, just so you get an objective view of, am I basing my rating on 1 book or 5 books, which again, personal opinion. So let's get to it. The first few authors I do not have a physical copy of because I read it and I just checked my reading history just now. I read it back in 2019. First we have Herman Hesse from 1946. I've read only one book by him, Siddhartha. I read this back in January 16, 2019. I only know that because I just double checked. The funny thing is I gave this 4 stars back then. And if I have my math correct, I was around 20, 21 when I first read this. And I have to admit, Herman Hesse and his writing feels very profound when you're at that age. You're in your early 20s, you just finish your teens, you are going through this whole life's existence, and everything has meaning. Every single river has some sort of depth. Everything is spiritual, poetic, it means things, whether it be enlightenment, transformation, or something similar. And again, it felt life-changing, and I gave it 4 stars back then, but now that I think about it, and I read it again, I think 2021, 2022, then thinking about it now, it's a bit more perplexing than I remember it to be. Feels like a philosophy student's fever dream. There. I get it's trying to be honest, it's trying to do all of these explorations, but it's also always constantly looking for answers. It refuses to get messy, and I mean, it's a German guy writing about Eastern philosophy and Buddhism, so it didn't age as well for me, and I gave Herman Hesse 2 out of 5 stars. It just feels to me like it's a book that's constantly searching for meaning without acknowledging what it means to be lost. And I give it 2 out of 5. Next we have Ernest Hemingway. I realized 2 books. The Sun Also Rises and Farewell to Arms. The Sun Also Rises, I only finished it because a guy I had a crush on told me he loves Hemingway and he loves the book. That should tell you everything. I'm kidding. Farewell to Arms was much better, and by better I think I gave it 3.5 stars back when I read it. But just generally Hemingway and his writing, I feel it is simple, straightforward, but there's this emotional constipation and just this, it reeks of masculinity that I just didn't connect with. Just show your feelings, bro. Like, I can appreciate his writing, but there was just personally no depth to the emotions from how I was personally experiencing it. But basically, Hemingway is how I imagine a male writer writing about love back then. And it just feels like it's written without vulnerability. I think that's the best way I can put it. And I will try to read The Old Man and the Sea, but at this point, Hemingway to me is at a 1 out of 5 stars, just because of The Sun Also Rises. I just really didn't like it. Didn't like it, even though Farewell to Arms was much better, it was still a 3 stars for me. Next we have Albert Camus, won the award 1957, and I've only read The Stranger by him. I mean, The Stranger is an absolute classic. I think it has stood the test of time. I have read it, I think, 2-3 times, and it's a pretty short, straightforward book. A lot of weight and depth to it. But the whole time I was writing my thoughts on Camus' The Stranger, I kept comparing it to why did I like and appreciate The Stranger but not Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, which are both, I would say, philosophical books. I mean, not the same philosophical fields, but they are both philosophical books. And it was a nice way to unpack just my reading preferences. But I think The Stranger had that beauty of, yes, it is simple, it's a bit more straightforward, but it also kind of feels endless. It kind of mimics life in a way that despite it being short, I felt like it captured the life much better than Siddhartha, which was actually the whole person's life, supposedly. And the impact it had on existentialism and being able to accept that lack of meaning or just feeling lost might be just a personal preference, but it really resonated with me. And the way the writing tied with the themes, it was great, really, really good. So in a way, also, it looks like it's about to rain. Albert Camus with The Stranger, him accepting the absurdity of life, while Siddhartha was looking for transcendence. And again, there's many other reasons why Siddhartha didn't work for me as much. especially with the time since I've read it. I guess The Stranger really just aged much better, and it feels profound to this day, and I feel like it will continue to stand the test of time. So Albert Camus, The Stranger, I give it 4 out of 5. Next we have Yasunari Kawabata, won the award 1968, and I've only read one book as well, Snow Country. And this book, I was reading my review of it back when I read it, I think 2020, 2019 as well. It feels like the narrative form of the Japanese saying mono no aware, which is the ephemeral nature of things. The way things are beautiful and we appreciate them because they are transient. They will pass. Things aren't forever. Nothing is forever. And that's what makes us appreciate life. And I think Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata captures that perfectly with Snow Country. And every time I read authors like Elisa Dusepin, who is able to say as much with its dialogue as with what is not written on the book, it always reminds me of Yasunari Kawabata's Snow Country and the way he writes silence and emptiness, the way other people write beautiful dialogue. It is the type of clean, piercing, simple writing that I can appreciate, especially as someone who loves emotional depth in prose. I think Yasunari Kawabata was able to capture simplicity in a way that I can personally appreciate it. So in a way, it kind of feels like there's no excess, there's no comfort. The emotional weight is more implied, which is not always my favorite thing, but it's something that I can really appreciate. I give Yasunari Kawabata 3 out of 5, and I really do want to check out his other works to see how much better I could like his just style of writing. Next we have Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 1982. I've only read Love in the Time of Cholera, which I have a funny story on because I've owned maybe 2-3 copies of 100 Years of Solitude, and I've lost them every single time. One time was on a train, one time was at an interview for an internship back in 2019, and the last time was, I believe, on an Uber or a Grab car. This was all before 2020, I believe. And at that point, I was just like, maybe it's not my time to read this yet. But then I realized after the 3rd time I lost it, I saw Love in the Time of Cholera was a book that my mom owned, and I decided to read it, and fantastic. Brilliant. Amazing. It feels like the absolute best of literary excess. There's so much richness to the plot, to the characters, to the emotions, and it doesn't shy away from a bit more, I don't want to say controversial, but difficult topics, even problematic topics. And it feels like a jungle with how it's so lush and just like so colorful, and just love. Cholera, I feel like those 2 words in the title of his book just captures his writing and the richness of his prose so beautifully. And the best way I can think about it is it just feels messy and alive and just so full of life. And even though I'm someone who sometimes like a little bit more subtlety in my books, it's something that I cannot deny is brilliant. And I forgot how long Love in the Time of Cholera is. I've only read it once, so I don't really remember, but I would read it like on my train rides, and it was like a small pocket book with the red cover. Absolutely stunning, and I was eating it up. I give Gabriel Garcia Marquez 4 out of 5. And maybe one day I'll read 100 Years of Solitude. I always reach the 100th page, but I always lose it before then. By then. We are 5 authors in. We have 9 more to go. Next, we have my first physical copy that I actually have with me here in Bangkok. We have Toni Morrison, who won the award back in 1993, and I've only read one. This is Sula by Toni Morrison, and I read this quite recently, only early last year. And Toni Morrison is an author I would like to experience more of. She is still an author that I'm discovering my affinity to in terms of the writing style. Having read Sula, you get to really see her impact and her importance, especially within the literary canon, both within just the Black experience and outside of it. And this is a beautifully complex friendship on womanhood, sisterhood, and just the moral ambiguity of it overall is something that I really appreciated. But the thing is, the writing style took a lot for me to get used to. It was something that, yes, there was a lot of beautiful lines that I would love to read over and over again, but I never quite had momentum while reading it, that it gave me a bit of a harder time to just really sit down and immerse myself in the book. Because yes, there's beauty, but I was also having difficulty with the writing style, the density of it, and I would definitely love to read her other works, which I do have a copy of Beloved somewhere here, which I hear only amazing things about. So I think Toni Morrison for me is definitely going to need more reads, similar to another author that I will mention later. But as of now, I'm giving her a 3.5 out of 5. Really love the moral weight and the important themes that she's tackling. Definitely a lot of brilliance here, but the writing style still need more reads for me to really digest. Next we have Kenzaburo Oe. Got the award back in 1994, and I've only read one book, A Personal Matter, which to this day I still remember very vividly my reading experience with it. And I remember starting it at 10 p.m. back home in Manila. I was in bed and I read it in one sitting, finished it at around 1, 2 a.m. and I was just devastated. I'm going to talk specifically about the book A Personal Matter, which is about a man whose newborn son is diagnosed with a brain hernia, and his struggle to accept/reject this son that he has. It's a very difficult read to see a relationship that's supposed to be filled with love and ease, father and son, but there's very big tension there. And it's a tension that it's not the son's fault, but it's a very personal matter. It becomes a very intimate view on such complex, difficult emotions, and you're just judging there, but also just, it feels very uncomfortable to read. And it's just a book that has really stayed with me for a very long time, and I'm still looking for a physical copy of it, and I haven't been able to. And there was a scene specifically in the book that, not really pertinent to the story, but it just such keen observation of how an author can really bring experiences that we don't really put into words, but then when they do, you're just like, oh, that is very true. Which is when the dad was in an ambulance and he was thinking to himself how the sound of an ambulance is usually something that comes and goes. You hear the sound from afar, then it rises, then it leaves. But when you're inside an ambulance, it's a sound that just never leaves. You're just constantly there, and it was such a jarring experience for him that, hey, the sound is not leaving. I am the one with the emergency. I'm the one who needs help, or at least my situation is the one that needs help. And I remember to this day, every time I hear an ambulance, that, God, just brilliant. I really want to read more of his works. It's just a bit more difficult for me to find, but Kenzaburo Oe, massive respect. I was really debating whether to give him 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. So for now, I'll give it 4.5 out of 5. I want to give his other works a proper try first before bumping it up to a 5. But he just is able to look at such morally difficult situations and despair and be able to crack it a bit open and show a little bit of tenderness, and God. But yeah, damn. Just remembering this book, it was an agonizing experience. Oh, worst of all, the book is semi-autobiographical. So knowing that while you're reading the book, I'm gonna use this to describe a specific author later, but specifically for this book, it feels so uncomfortably intimate. There. 4.5 out of 5. Oh, Kenzaburo Oe. Next we have Jose Saramago. I have read Death and Intervals as well as Blindness, and he got the award on my birth year, 1998. 2024 was the year where I got so obsessed with Portuguese literature, both the language and just specifically in Portugal, with Fernando Pessoa, and then Jose Saramago, and then just within the Portuguese language, Clarice Lispector. I really hope these books translate well because, damn. Jose Saramago is an author that I would not have expected to land so well with me because it's a lot more plot driven. There's really a story and a moral weight and narrative that he's trying to portray. Blindness is about a world where everyone suddenly goes blind, and Definite Intervals is about a world where people stop dying. And it's very, there's a plot there. And me as a reader, I like more characters development, nothing really happening, just internal explorations. But Jose Saramago knows how to tell a story, knows how to ask difficult questions and make you force yourself to look at these questions in the eye and ask you, what would you do? What would you do? And the thing with Jose Saramago is he writes very densely. I swear this man forgets to put punctuations when he writes. Sometimes you just look at a page and it just never ends. It just never ends. I'm not kidding. Where is the... Sir, it is a very dense, mentally demanding work. And I feel like if I've only read Death at Intervals, I would give him a lower rating. But after reading both Blindness and this, the weight of the whole story and what he's trying to land is something that is able to go beyond just the difficulty of reading his works. It's dense, it's difficult. Sometimes it feels like homework. But the thing is, despite that, I can still read it. I'm able to immerse myself read it, which is very important to me with books that are difficult to read. Even if it feels like a chore, I want to not want to stop reading it. So I give Jose Saramago, I was choosing between 3.5 and 4, but I'm going to give him a proper 4 stars out of 5. And we're going to a favorite. We're going to go to our first 5-star. And I'm already telling you that now because I love this author with my life. We have Mr. Kazuo Ishiguro, who won the award in 2017. And I realized I haven't read any Nobel Prize winning author in between 2017 and 1998, which is very interesting. I'm going to check out who those other authors are. But I have read 5 books by Kazuo Ishiguro. Never Let Me Go, Remains of the Day, Pale View of Hills, Clara and the Sun, and An Artist of the Floating World. Which I realized I should have a copy of the other 2, but I didn't seem to find them. I couldn't seem to find them, so we're going to be holding these 3, but honestly, I don't know what to tell you guys. Kazuo Ishiguro, I feel like is the author among all of these that captures readability, but also brilliance. You have that moral weight and questions, but also stories that are a lot more, it looks simple at its core, but there's depth hiding underneath it and he's able to do this without having to make his writing so difficult to digest, which is not always a good or a bad thing. But for him, I think the readability and making his books a lot more accessible, I feel like is something that I appreciate. I don't think writing has to be difficult for it to be good, or vice versa. Writing doesn't have to be fully digestible for it to be good. But in the case of just the accessibility, I think Kazuo Ishiguro balances perfectly that brilliance and just readability that I've always really appreciated. Never Let Me Go in its moral questions. Remains of the Day, it's just so quiet and so filled with regret and what ifs. Pale View of Hills, the use of perspective, stunning. And just even Artist of the Floating World, which I think is one of my lesser favorite works of his, I still really loved and appreciated. And it says a lot for me to read at least 5 books of an author and just, I cannot give him any notes. I'm not to say that I am the authority here, but just from my own reading preference, I will read whatever you write, Mr. Kazuo Ishiguro. I think among all of these authors, he feels like a bit of an emotional core within the Nobel Prize winners that I've read. And that means a lot coming from me because I love emotionally rich books. And that isn't to say that he will try to pull the emotion out of you, because he is also a master at restraint. He knows how much is showing. He knows how much to make you feel without overdoing it. And again, just prowess. I have copies of The Unconsoled and When We Were Orphans, and The Buried Giant that I haven't read, that I really hope to finish within 2026. And that should pretty much cover most of Kazuo Ishiguro's books. And that is it's a life goal for me. I didn't say it. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. Easy. Next we have Flights by Olga Tokarczuk. She won the award back in 2018. And this is a difficult one, and I don't really have much to say because I read it when she won the Nobel. Next we have Olga Tokarczuk, who won the award back in 2018, and I've only read Flights by her. And the thing is, I don't really have much to say about it. I first read this when it won the International Booker Prize. Again, you guys are seeing like the parallels of what I really try to follow with the literary prizes. And then she won the Nobel Prize, and I was just, I needed to read it. And Flights is supposedly a book that takes the concept of travel and how it connects to every other aspect of life, the way we function with our bodies, the way we relate with other people, all of this. But honestly, and I'm being very frank with you here, I don't remember much about it. Even when I was looking at my review back then, a lot of beautiful passages, and I do remember that. And the thing is, I was reading this on the train for I think 1 to 2 weeks, and that really helped my experiences. And there were so many passages there that I love and adore, and I saw the photos of the quotes. But there was a lot of brilliant writing that I really appreciated, but a lot of it also just flew past my head. I was a bit confused. Maybe I read it while I was still too young to understand, or I needed to have more reading in me to fully grasp what she has to offer. So I do plan on reading this in the future, and I don't think this is that reading experience should be representative of her whole works, because I've heard amazing things about her other books, the Book of Jacob, the Impusium, and just her works in general. And these are reviews by people that I trust and have similar reading tastes with. So I really want to give her a proper try in the future, but for now I'm giving her a good 2.5 stars out of 5. I had to take an itty bitty break because the microphone died, and good thing I caught it. But we march along. We are now at our next author, which is Miss Annie Ernaux, who won the award back in 2022. And I've read 3 of her books. A Woman's Story, Happening, which I lent to a friend who lives upstairs, and Simple Passion, which I loved. Annie Ernaux is very, very easy for me to describe. The whole time I'm reading her book, I will reference what I said earlier. Uncomfortably intimate. I think her unique autofiction, semi-autobiographical style, there's something so intriguing about it. When she inserts herself and her own life in the story that she's building, there's intrigue. And the way her stories are always so exhilarating. They're so full of sensuality, emotions, and just... there's a precision to her writing that is just so sharp. No decorations, no indulgence. She just hands it to you straight, and love it. It's like she's writing It's like she's writing her memory not from a pen, but with, I don't know, with a knife or something. And I just really appreciate the way that Annie Ernaux is able to write her own life history, or just a person's history, whether it be her own or not, and dress it as a story. Happening was very raw, political. A Woman's Story with its mourning, and then A Simple Passion, stunning book. Just, it feels like sensuality stripped bare. It's so honest, not always right, and the vulnerability to be able to share such a story. Stunning. I give Annie Ernaux 4 out of 5. Next, it feels weird not to be ending with this author, but we are going to one of my favorite authors of all time, which I discovered because of both the International Booker Prize and the Nobel Prize in Literature, which is Mr. Jan Fosse. I have 5 books here. I have read Illicit the Fire, Scenes from a Childhood. I have 2 copies of Scenes from a Childhood. I'm gifting this to a friend. A Shining, and Septology. I also have a copy of Melancholy 1 and 2, but I am saving that for winter this year. It's supposed to be one of his other masterpieces, and I wanted to give myself a breathing room, maybe a good year. I read Septology back in June of last year, and one of the few times I finished a book and I knew it was going to be like a top 1, 2, 3 favorite book of all time for me. But let me calm myself. Jan Fosse won the award back in 2023, and I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books by him. The one that I don't have a physical copy of here is Morning and Evening, which should be somewhere here, but I can't seem to find it. I really need to fix my bookshelf, guys. I really need to fix my bookshelf. But anyway, Jan Fosse, can I be dramatic for a moment here? Jan Fosse doesn't just write books. He writes meditations and prayers, and it feels like reading his books, especially Septology, in a span of 2 weeks. It's such a dense book. Septology is a book that is one long sentence with no punctuation marks, but it was the most peaceful time of my day for a good 2 weeks. It was something that I was looking forward to every single night, and I just was devouring it. I felt like I don't want to say praying, but praying and meditating, and there's a repetition and rhythm and hypnotism in the way that he writes that just makes it flow, even though there's no punctuation, even though there's a constant change in perspectives and just time and memory. It just works. It just works. And it feels like when you read him, you cannot expect anything. You just, again, let me be dramatic. You just need to surrender. You just need to let yourself go. You just need to accept what he's giving you and just let yourself get lost. And when people say, Septology specifically, people say it's boring. I know someone I respect said it's boring, and it really, I wanted to cry, but honestly, my love and respect for Septology and Jan Fosse as a whole goes beyond any other people's opinions. I've read 1-star reviews, 2, 3, doesn't change my mind. And the reading experience just feels so sacred and special, and that applies to all of his books. I just keep saying Septology because that is up there. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Scenes from a childhood, the way he uses memory and looks at the mundane things where nothing really happens, but there's a strange depth there that it will catch you off guard. At least at the Fire, the way he uses memory, same thing with A Shining. Stunning. Breaks the rating scale. I give Jan Fosse infinity out of 5. One of my favorite authors of all time. These Norwegian authors. I love them. Anyway, we're down to our last 2. And next we have Miss Han Kang, who won the award in 2024, and I have read 3 books by her. The Vegetarian, which I read a good 5 years ago on an ebook, and then The White Book, which I also read on an ebook a couple of years ago, and then Greek Lessons, which I read this year. The funny thing is, I loved The Vegetarian and I loved The White Book. The Greek Lessons, not as much. I gave this a good 2.5 stars. Han Kang to me is an author that is devastating in her simplicity and deceptively simple when it comes to her writing, because it's not the most difficult read language-wise, but it never sacrifices beauty in terms of writing. You will be an awe for writing, but it's also devastating. She cuts through with what she's writing. The themes themselves, they are heavy, they're important, they're difficult, and that blends so well with her style of writing that she doesn't need to do anything more. Because what you think is simple and soft suddenly becomes piercing. Suddenly you start feeling something a bit more painful and difficult as you're reading her writing. And I say that a lot more for The Vegetarian and The White Book. The White Book specifically is the book that I keep thinking of when I say deceptively simple. It's the way she writes grief in that novel is breathtaking but also heartbreaking. So Han Kang to me, Greek Lessons, I don't really have much thoughts. I might need to reread it again. I didn't really connect with it that much, with the writing style, the narrative, all of that. And I do want to read more of her books, especially Human Acts, which I have a copy here somewhere that I hear is an amazing read. Difficult, again, especially with Han Kang, the way, one of the reasons the Nobel gave her the award was also the way she looks at the world today, what we've experienced in the past, and where she's taking her own stories and fiction. Even though she's only published very few books compared to the other Nobel laureates. It's honestly impressive that she's already won the Nobel Prize so early on in her career. So big respect, 4 out of 5 for Miss Han Kang. And last but not least is our 2025 winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, which is Laszlo Krasznahorkai, a Hungarian author. And I've only read one book by him. Give me a second. A mountain to the north, a lake to the south, paths to the west, and a river to the east, which was my pre-game, my appetizer to Satantango, which I've been meaning to read for I think the last 2 to 3 years. I've heard about the book, the movie that this book that took inspiration from this book. But I haven't watched that either. I wanted to read it first, but I've been intimidated because I hear it's dense, difficult, all of that good stuff. But I also hear Laszlo Krasznahorkai's name thrown around every time Jan Fosse and Knausgaard are in the same conversation. And I love those two authors. They are dense, they are difficult reads, but I eat them up. And I wanted to see what the fuss was about with this one. So the funny thing is, after finishing this, I was like, this is not the post-apocalyptic depressive book I was expecting. So apparently this is one of his most meditative and peaceful works. So I got a taste of his writing, but I didn't get a taste of it, that apocalyptic lens. This one is about a monk who travels around Kyoto and enters a temple and just roams around, and you kind of drift in and out of the story. It's just randomly starts and it randomly ends, and you're just like, oh, we're done exploring. But the thing is, the writing, albeit dense, you get lost in. And as I'm explaining this once again, it reminds me of Jan Fosse in terms of just dipping in and out of a story. Dipping in and out of a story, it's not an easy read, but the way the author just magnetizes you and catches you right away is something that I got really intrigued by. Story overall, not really sure how I feel about it. It was a lot of no plot, just vibes, but heavy on just vibes. But the writing was intriguing, and I was interested to see where his actual expertise, how his actual expertise would look like, which is more on the depressing and apocalyptic novels, such as Satantango, which is a debut novel. So I think my rating for Laszlo Krasznahorkai will be largely dependent on a book that represents his writing style, but not really his themes and just the tone of his books. But I would like to give him a 3.5 star, maybe even closer to a 4 star. I will keep you guys updated once I eventually finish this, but at least this one, intriguing, not really sure where we are going. Love the writing, difficult, but it catches your attention. Intimidated, but I promise to get to it. But yes, there you have it. My little Nobel, oh, my wrist, guys, you can see my wrist. I injured my wrist, but anyway, you can see my Nobel Prize in Literature stack. Not complete. I don't own some of them, but I think on an average, we have a pretty strong average. I think the Nobel Prize gets it right more often than not. And again, they've given me some of my favorite authors, such as Kazuo Ishiguro and Jan Fosse, which that alone, I give the Nobel Prize big props. I think they've done a lot better in recent years in diversifying their reads, which should have come much, much sooner, but it's been very interesting getting to see more perspectives by different people around the world. More translated works is always something I'm going to be very, very happy to see. And yes, I am curious to know, also this is very heavy, I'm curious to know who your favorite Nobel Prize winners are, and more interestingly, who do you think could possibly get a Nobel Prize in the future? It's an interesting thing to think about. I don't know my answer yet. I'm just curious to know yours. Maybe I'll put my guesses in the comments. So, but there you have it. I'm not gonna pick it up again. I can feel my wrist hurting. But I hope you guys enjoyed. This is a very last minute video for me. I planned this yesterday when they announced the Nobel. And then I was like, you know what? I want to make a video about this because I've never really sat down and reflected on the Nobel Prize before. I've done it for the International Booker, so I hope you guys enjoy this video. I am scared how long this will be because I filmed it in many small parts. So I hope you stuck around till the end, and I'll see you back at our usual spot.